Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan. I hope you're doing well today. Of course, a couple of weeks ago, mind you, I've been absent for a little bit. I've had a lot of things I've been doing, like watching Christmas movies, going to see Christmas lights, going out with my wife on dates and whatnot during December. We're now on Christmas vacation, which is really nice. And I've been catching up on a lot of things I haven't had time to do so far this month and working on house cleaning, all kinds of crazy stuff. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, I read Goosebumps Series 2000 number 4, Invasion of the Body Squeezers, Part 1. And of course, I do want to read all three of these books this month for the first time ever. Right now is the review for Invasion of the Body Squeezers, Part 2, which is also Series 2000, Part 5, or number 5. I mentioned this too in the previous review a while back. The covers actually line up. How cool is that? I think it's pretty neat, or something like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. So, Part 2. Where do I even begin with this? Didn't love it. Have a lot of complaints about it. My poor wife has heard me whine about this book for like 2 weeks about how I just didn't want to pick it back up. I kept trying to pick it up. I would get up early and decide, you know, I'm going to finish this thing before I go to work today. And I would go to pick it up, and I'd be like, nope. Like 5 pages in, and I was like, nope, I'm done. This one is a little bit longer than the other one. This one is about 128 pages long, which is not super long or anything. And this one picks up immediately after the final scene of the previous book. It also has kind of a story so far prologue type of thing to it to help you catch up in case you didn't read Part 1. Now, I personally recommend reading Part 1 because I personally think Part 1 was a little bit better than this book. This book has like one thing in the entire book that I actually really like. Kinda two, but they're really just one encompassing thing. I don't want to spoil anything from the previous story, so I'm going to be very delicate about what I talk about in this particular review. If you're curious about the general story of that, or of these two-parters, this duology, watch the review for the first one if you don't mind, because I really don't want to spoil this for you, just in case you read the first book and you really liked it and haven't picked this one up yet. I really don't want to ruin it for you guys. I try to avoid spoilers on my reviews just for your sake, because a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people kind of want you to avoid things like that. But anyway, so for Part 2, we pick up immediately after Book 1. Where do I really go with this? Let's just kind of generally sum first one real quick. Young boy named Jack has an obsession with alien-type stuff because he thinks an invasion is starting in his hometown. No one believes him. He has a little sister who I can't stand. She's even worse here than she was in the first book. She lies constantly, all the time. We all know somebody like this at some point in our life, and they drive you nuts. And this kid drives me nuts. She's in this book a little bit less, but when she's there, she's unbearable. Anyway, a lot of this book is filled with the typical Goosebumps stuff of the parents never believing Jack for anything he says. Of course, he also has a neighbor named Mr. Fleshman, who is apparently a special effects worker for movies, for Hollywood. And we learned a little bit about that in the first book, and I like Mr. Fleshman as a character. So, that's really all there is to say about the first book, and I complained about this in Part 1. I feel like, number one, the same issue here is that the scope needs to be a little bit bigger as a story, and I was hoping going into Part 2 of Invasion of the Body Squeezers that it would have pulled that off and had kind of a little bit of a larger picture. Maybe our character for once has to go to another state or something to get away from the invasion happening in his hometown. We don't know if this is going to be a worldwide invasion or whatever. The scope is too small. The scope is way too small. It feels like too small of a story. To be fair, and I said this in my Part 1 review, Goosebumps typically focuses on more small-scale stories. Not a personal horror a lot of the time, but most of the time I would say it does do that. This is kind of the same thing when it comes to that. And I wish it had been a little bit more broad. If you're going to do a two-parter, have some other characters. That's another thing, too. They have side characters in here. We follow Jack's perspective, throughout the entire book. And I think it's a little bit of a misstep, frankly, because I feel like Jack is... He's Jack. He's okay. You know, nobody believes him, and that's fine. I think a lot of people would have done more for the story with having Jack feel so secluded from everybody, and the book tries to do that. Because this book does have something kind of cool. At the end of Part 1, we got introduced to really the first, right there in Jack's face, alien that showed up. And it tries to hug him, of all things. Very odd. When this book picks up, the science teacher from school shows up at Jack's house and tries to help him with communicating with this alien when it shows up. The teacher's shocked by it, Jack is shocked by it. They try to be kind to it and try to avoid any kind of real thing that could potentially cause this invasion to be really bad. And then Jack realizes real quick when the teacher goes in to hug this alien, this little tiny green grasshopper-looking thing that grows pretty solid, pretty fast. And I say grow solid as in he grows bigger pretty fast. They realize real quick the aliens aren't trying to hug you. And this goes in kind of a body horror area. And when I read this book, when I started this book a couple of weeks back, I think like the same day I posted my review, I was so excited about that. I was so excited to see a body horror book because no one had brought that up about this book. And I will maintain, even after finishing this book a little bit ago, that it does have a certain level of body horror stuff, very much like the movie They Live. If you've seen that John Carpenter classic, you know what I'm talking about. It's a little bit like that, but not just like They Live. It's more like you can't trust anybody, kind of like The Thing a little bit. You don't really know who's possessed by an alien. And when I say possessed, the body horror aspect is probably going to be pretty gruesome. I'm about to explain it to you. So if you do get a little squeamish, you might want to skip a few clicks to the side to get past this part of the video. Basically, the aliens aren't trying to hug you. Like I said, when they go to hug you, they grow some razor nail claw things out of their fingers, and they stab it into your back, and then they eventually go into the wound in your back. Like, they don't just go into the cuts, they literally open up your back and go into you. And that is sick, and I love it. It's twisted, and it's horrifying, and it really put a chill down my spine the first time I read this a couple of weeks ago, when I first started reading it a couple of weeks ago. And I was so down for that. I was like, you know, after part one being kind of whack and kind of lame, maybe we're going to get something pretty cool here. And this book let me down. It's like the only thing about it I like. Most of this book is literally Jack running around telling people, please, for the love of God, believe me, there's an alien invasion, and no one believes him. And we just kind of go from set piece to set piece to set piece, just constantly. It feels like your typical Goosebumps narrative. The scope should have been bigger. It would have really improved the storyline. A lot of it is like, Jack will go to school willingly, knowing that there are people there, including a science teacher, that he knows personally who are possessed by aliens. What? It just, the logic behind the story, it just falls apart so quick, and that's the biggest shame for me. Jack's an idiot. Jack is an idiot. His parents are idiots. Even if they don't believe him in the typical Goosebumps fashion, they're just stupid. Your kid is saying all these things. At least get the kid a psychiatrist, you know? Like, they didn't even try to do that. They mentioned it in the first book, and I think they briefly mentioned it here, or maybe even had an appointment. I don't remember. I've deleted so much of this from my brain over the last 2 weeks that I really don't care enough to remember those details. It's a brutal read because nothing happens. It's just nothing happening so often in this book. And that's a shame to me because I feel like Stein always does something pretty cool. And again, the body horror stuff makes up for a lot of that, but the character stuff doesn't. The events don't, if you can call them events. The idea of not knowing who to trust around you is not utilized to its best, fullest potential. For a kid's book, I understand why, but I still think there could have been some kind of cool paranoia, excuse me. I couldn't remember how to say it, it's kind of late. There could have been a cool paranoia atmosphere to this story, and there wasn't, which is kind of a shame. Again, it's kind of underutilized in that way. This is like the first time ever at this particular point in Goosebumps history when this book came out that we had ever taken a story that was about 300 pages long. It really didn't need to be for a Goosebumps story, as flat as this plot is, and take it and put it into 2 books to try to market it that way. It was a nice little experiment. I don't hate it, but there's really not enough content here to justify a two-part duology thing for Part 4 and Part 5 of Series 2000. I don't think it works. I really don't think it works. I think it's some of the weakest stuff I've ever read from Series 2000. I think Return to Horrorland is a better book. I think that... what is some weaker stuff that I've read? I think Brain Juice, for sure, is better than this book, for me personally. And I think, again, I hoped that when I read Part 1, I was hoping that Part 2, and I think I said this in my review, I was hoping that Part 2 would make me like that book more, really justify it for me. Let me tell you, it didn't. It really didn't for me. It just kind of felt like I had wasted my time on both, even though I have moments in both books I like. And the body horror stuff that's here in this book is a lot better than most things in that first book. So I feel like at this point, it kind of dragged down a lot of Part 1 for me as well. It kind of makes me dislike that book even more. You know, there's one more book in this Body Squeezers trilogy. It is a Give Yourself Goosebumps book, a GYG book, a Choose Your Own Adventure book, if you don't know what that is. And I'm hoping that's going to be good. I'm going to start it tomorrow or maybe tonight. And I hope to get a review out before Christmas Eve on the Saturday. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. If it doesn't happen this weekend, it might be Monday. But it will sure be in the next few days. I'm going to try my best at least, because I really want to get this done. I kind of want to dedicate next year more to the Goosebumps channel and trying to get more content ready for you guys and just kind of finish up what I have left of stuff. But anyway, I really hope to get more information out there to you guys, because I really, I'm going to be honest with you, I feel like I'm getting a lot of books like this now. These big, massive letdowns. I try to avoid this as best as I possibly can to have more for you guys to talk about. But I'm hitting that part of the channel now where we're getting a lot of weak ones left and right. I'm hoping I can find some good ones here and there that people will still recommend to me, but I'm kind of pushing off to the side, hoping that they're going to be good the way I hope they will be. But anyway, that's all I really have to say about Invasion of the Body Squeezers Part 2. What a weak one, man. There was so much in here that was so wasted when it comes to potential, when it comes to characters, when it comes to so many things that I think could have been so much better than what we got here. It's such a letdown. Are Part 1 and Part 2 worth reading? No. Not in my opinion. I don't think they are. But if I had to rate Invasion of the Body Squeezers Part 2 on a 5-star basis, I think I'd give it like a 2 out of 5 stars. I'm going to be honest with you. And it probably drags Part 3 down, or Part 1 down to about a 2 out of 3, or 2 out of 5 for me as well. Just because it just didn't land. That one's more tolerable than this one. That one's a slow building book. So I kind of don't hate it for that. It's kind of trying to do something a little bit different for a Part 1, Part 2 duology thing. But Part 2 really craps the bed, man. It just, no. No. Nope. There's kind of a weird ending, too, to the book. Not like the very end, like the final chapter, but the solution to everything in the story. Involving a particular monster. Very weird scene. Very weird scene. Not sure how I feel about that. It feels like it kind of came out of left field a little bit. Not to the extreme of like the blob that ate everyone, but just bizarre enough that I'm not sure why Jack would decide to do things the way he did it at the end of the book. Not that I'm going to spoil it or anything, but the weird ending. Not sure how I feel about that. Really a big miss for me when it comes to Invasion of the Body Squeezers Part 2. 2 out of 5 stars for me, like I said. Have you guys read this duology? What do you think about it? Put your thoughts and comments down below. I would love to hear what you all have to say about this book. And again, I hope to have out the review for the GYG Body Squeezers book here soon. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get around to it, but I have a couple of days before Christmas Eve. So, like I said, we'll see what happens. I'll try to get that together for you. And I hope to see you soon. I hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas. If I don't talk to you before then, like I said, I might get the review out before Christmas Eve. I don't know yet. But if I do not, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. If you happen to be traveling, please be safe. God bless you guys. Remember the reason for the season, which is Jesus. And thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate you sticking around and waiting for so long for the review of Part 2. This one was brutal, dude. When I tell you that it took me a long time to really motivate myself to sit down today and read the last 30 or 40 pages, I don't think you understand the kind of emotional strain I went through trying to genuinely force myself to sit down and read it. Because I really didn't want to. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. God bless you all. Merry Christmas again. Goodbye.